A few weeks ago, I talked about how a Catholic charter school was waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court to weigh in on whether or not it is constitutional for a religious charter school, to receive taxpayer funding. And it looks like they have finally reached a decision. This is coming from The Conversation in an article that reads Supreme Court's one sentence order closes the door to Catholic charter school but leaves it open for future challenges. This was published on May 23rd, 2025. So, in a nutshell, here, the article is telling us that the Supreme Court said, yeah, this is unconstitutional. You're a religious school. You cannot get taxpayer money. But this article is also claiming that later on down the line, it is possible that based on what happened in this case, that some religious schools could get access to taxpayer funding. And how is that possible? Well, that is the question that I'm going to try and answer for you here today. And just a reminder, if you enjoy this content, make sure that you hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel so that you never miss out on all this great educational news that I'm going to be sharing with you all. So let's take a look at all of this. And what I want to do is first, I want to talk a little bit about charter schools and how they operate. Then I'm going to give you a timeline of events for this school that is in question, and then talk about the specific article we have here, this ruling, and what that means for the future. So, first things first, let's talk a little bit about charter schools. Now, most religious schools are private schools, and private schools, they charge tuition, so students pay to attend, and private schools are self-sustained. They don't get access to taxpayer funds. But charter schools do. They're not exactly public schools. They're charter schools. However, they can get state funding or federal funding, whatever. I'm not exactly sure on all the logistics, but I know that they are entitled to some funding. So let's take a look at the timeline and see how all this happened, because first of all, it's strange that there is a religious school that became a charter school in the first place. Like that's how all of this transpired, is with Saint Isidore of Seville, or Seville, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but they were granted charter school membership or status. And right now I have an article pulled up. This is from the Catholic World Report, and it has broken down the timeline for us. So let me just read this here for you. It says, in the face of opposition led by State Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who filed suit challenging its existence on its second attempt, Oklahoma's 5-member statewide virtual charter school board approved the creation of Saint Isidore, named after the patron saint of the internet, in a 3-2 vote on June 5th, 2023. So as you can see here, this dates all the way back to 2023. And so this school, just popped up, and they were approved in Oklahoma to be a charter school, which was weird. And the Attorney General said exactly that, like, hey, that's weird. And so in the article, it says here, on June 25th, 2024, in Drummond versus Oklahoma statewide virtual charter school board, Oklahoma Supreme Court, relying largely but not exclusively on state grounds, invalidated efforts to open St. Isidore for the 2024-2025 year. So basically, Gentner Drummond, the Attorney General who filed this lawsuit, he said, hey, this is unconstitutional. And a year after St. Isidore was approved as a charter school, the Oklahoma Supreme Court said, yeah, this is unconstitutional. We agree with you. However, it was most recently taken to the Supreme Court. So this has been an ongoing thing for about 2 years now. And we finally have what has been said by the Supreme Court in our latest article that we're going to look at here. So Here is what it says. The saga over Saint Isidore of Seville, or Seville, which hoped to become the nation's first religious charter school, has come to a surprising end for now. In April 2025, Supreme Court justices heard arguments in the case from Oklahoma, which dealt with how to interpret the First Amendment's religious clauses. Proponents argued that prohibiting local public school boards from contracting with a faith-based organization would be unconstitutional because it hinders free exercise of religion. Critics warned a faith-based charter school would be an unconstitutional breach of the Establishment Clause, which forbids the government from establishing an official religion or promoting particular faiths over others. And see, this was one of the weird things about this, is that if you open the door to a religious Catholic school, like what other religions can be included? Does this mean that, those who are of Islamic faith, if they open a charter school, then they also get state funding, or a Buddhist school, or just what other religions are out there? It's like you're on a slippery slope if you allow one religion to get funding, and then other religions will pop up, and then if you decide not to allow them, are you discriminating against them? It becomes a whole mess. And that's basically kind of what was being argued here. So continuing on, it says both sides anticipated a pivotal ruling. However, in an anticlimactic outcome, the Supreme Court issued a brief order May 22nd, 2025. The 4-4 outcome leaves a lower court judgment in place that prevented St. Isidore's from opening, but did not explain why. So it says here it held in place a lower court judgment. And what that is referring to is the judgment that took place in June of last year, in 2024, where the Oklahoma Supreme Court said, you can't open for this school year. It's unconstitutional. You can't do this. So basically, the Supreme Court has said it's deadlocked. We're 4-4. And the ruling that previously took place in Oklahoma is the one that is going to stand here. Now, continuing on, it says, so what does the order do? On its face, the Supreme Court's terse one-sentence opinion means that Oklahoma cannot presently create and fund a Roman Catholic charter school and online K-12 institution. However, because the Supreme Court did not address the underlying merits of the claim, it arguably leaves the door open to similar challenges in Oklahoma and elsewhere. So, here is why this article is pointing out that it could later on down the line allow or leave the door open for religious charter school funding from taxpayers, because the Supreme Court did not actually make a ruling. They didn't set any kind of precedent. They didn't decide in favor or not in favor of this particular school. They just could not reach an agreement and are saying that the decision that the states had is what will stand in this case. So it means that it is possible for a religious charter school to pop up, let's say, in another state and get taxpayer money. And it could come back to the Supreme Court. But as it stands now, the Supreme Court has not made any kind of precedent. They have not said anything that will, just automatically trump whatever goes on within the states. Now, something else to consider here, and something that is brought up in this article, is that we're currently in the school choice movement. And already there are numerous states who have voucher programs, and there are plenty of students who qualify for these voucher programs that can use their school vouchers to go to a private religious institution. So already we are seeing that. We are seeing that religious institutions, private ones, are able to access taxpayer funding. However, uh, as is in this situation, having a religious charter school, at least in Oklahoma, you cannot do that. So that is what this article is talking about. And I think that this is really interesting. This was a really crazy case. As it was pointed out, this is Oklahoma's first religious charter school. And if the Supreme Court did make a ruling on this and did say that it was constitutional for them to receive taxpayer funding, then that would be a huge deal. And I could potentially see a lot of schools that are religious in nature popping up and trying to basically do the same thing. But in any case, that is what's going on. That is what it's talking about in this article. And, it just, the way that this is worded, the closes the door right now but leaves it open for future challenges, kind of is like a little questionable. You're like, what does that actually mean? And that's what I wanted to get into. What it means is that the Supreme Court didn't really make a decision, and it is possible that we will see more cases like this later on down the line, maybe in other states, or it could even be brought back to the Supreme Court in another instance. But my question to you is, what do you think about this decision? What do you think about as it is now, some private religious institutions getting taxpayer money through school voucher programs? Let me know down in the comment section. Also, remember to consider liking this video if you enjoy this content and subscribing to the channel, because like I said, I'm going to be covering a lot of interesting educational news topics here on Classroom Camp. That's all I have for you in this one. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.